All right, peace and greetings, YouTubers. So welcome to another edition of In the News. Let's just jump right into it. I want to start with this video that has gone viral only because I swear, poor guy, he reminds me of myself so much. Let's just go to the clip. By the way, I'm going to cut the audio because I don't know if I have clearance to use the music, so I'm going to just talk over it. All right, here we go. So I already figured this wasn't going to go well because the water's already at his waistline. And to try to carry somebody, and I don't know if he skipped a leg day or what, but it was just, once he started leaning, I knew it was over. Right here, he starts leaning. There's that lean. Oh, boom. Done. Oh, everything. And mind you, this is runoff water. This is sewer water, car oil, everything that's in the street that she's soaked in. She's head first in the water. I thought she hit her head on the car right there. And she's pissed too. Like, get off me. Get off me. Don't touch me. Move. They broke up right there. Oh, and then she fell again. Oh, it's really over now. They ain't getting back together. And then here he comes to save the day. Some other dude. I'm going to cover her up because I don't need y'all seeing her exposed. Ah, poor guy. Poor guy. And I don't know why he was holding dude's shoulder like he's still helping. Man, I felt so bad for both of them. I hope they're able to bounce back from that. Because, you know, some couples might not have been able to recover. Like, some couples, she would have already been deleting all his pictures from her Instagram right now as we speak. Like, he would have never existed. Because, man, poor guy. Plus, I hope they drove. Like, imagine having to go through all that and then you got to stand and wait at the train station for the train after that. Y'all standing there soaked and wet. She's pissed. And mind you, they're not even soaked because they got caught in a downpour. They're soaked because they went under the current like 5 or 6 times and got swept away. Like, man, that's everything. Phones ruined. Her hair was done for. I know she probably just got it done too, so she's pissed because now she got to do it again. I was like, man. But I'm trying to figure out what part of town they were in. Now, the video says D.C., but when I was doing the research, they were saying it's actually Old Town Alexandria. But, yo, Alexandria shuts down so early, especially Old Town. Like, it'd be 7:51, everything's closed. I'm like, dang, that's really like the go home, we shut down after dinner hours type of side of town. So, I don't know. But I hope he gets everything he wants for Christmas. Like, I'm not even gonna lie. Like, I was laughing so hard because I saw myself in him. I was like, that is something I would do. Not because I wouldn't have been able to carry the girl, but I'm just clumsy already. Like, I can be a little clumsy. And then you add some Russian water at the same time. Oh, if that would have been me, same video would have been viral. I would have had to hide from YouTube for a few months. But man, because I know I'm a little clumsy. Like, even when I'm at the gym, I walk past the bench press. Because in my head, I just see myself sneezing and dropping everything. And then, I don't know, the whole thing falls on my neck. And then for the rest of my life, I got to blink 1 for yes and 2 for no. So I'll be walking past the bench press at the gym. I'll be on all the senior citizen machines. I'll be on them things, tearing it up. Like 10. I got a whole bunch of friends at the gym that are like 70. Because I'll be going at like 7 in the morning when ain't nobody in there. But man, that's why I always say, like, man, when it comes to like lifting certain things, I be nervous because I just know sometimes I will stumble over my foot or something. I remember, like, I think I've told this before, but like when my friends had asked me to help them move, I was like, dang, man, y'all always want to call the smallest friend to come do all the heavy lifting. Like, man, and they had them stairs that curve. I ain't never worked so hard for a slice of pizza in my life because, you know, they had some pizza when we was done, but I worked hard for that pizza. Like I said, you call me for the fun stuff, okay? Call me for karaoke night, trivia night, taboo, heads up, black card revoked, you know, all of those kind of things. That's what I'm good for. But I'm sure they will be okay. But I don't know why they thought they were going to be able to get across that. Like, the water was already too high. Maybe you might have been able to get away with it if it didn't go above the knee. But once it's at the waist, like, that's all the weight of the water coming. And then you're carrying somebody at the same time. So your balance has to be here. As soon as that balance gets shifty, and mind you, that doesn't mean she's going to be sitting still done for. Woo! That's a video there. I had a good laugh at that. But hopefully everything worked out for them, wherever they are. Anyway, moving on. So I got a chance to watch Malice at the Palace, and I talked about it a little bit on the last video. However, now that I've seen the documentary, I can bring my thoughts together full circle. And to be honest, my sentiments are still pretty much the same. But if you remember, there was a Detroit Pistons and Indiana Pacers game where there was already tension in the environment. A lot was already going on. There's all kind of things riding on this series that was taking place. There were a few scuffles between some of the players, and so tension was already tight in the arena. It was already kind of just, there was a threshold that had already been met, and all it took was like one trigger and everything was about to go down. Okay, this is like the domino effect. And so you get to that portion where there's a scuffle between Ron Artest and another player. Ron Artest lays on that table, and like he says in the documentary, that was what he was doing to try to cope and bring his energy way down so that he could control himself and get back to the game. And that's when you saw that fan throw the cup that landed on Ron Artest, and it was on from there. But before I get into my 2 cents, I need y'all to check out this clip. Like, I didn't even catch this. My friend caught it. So let's watch the clip and then we'll talk. Okay, folks. So I want you to pay attention to where my pointer goes. Really, it's just my remote. This guy right here in the blue, top of my remote. Okay, this guy in the blue, what's going to happen is he's going to walk up the stairs. Then when he realizes he's in closer proximity to the player, he changes his mind, walks back down the stairs, and then punches himself in the face and throws himself on the ground. Watch. He's walking, changes his mind. Oh! What kind of foolery? Side note, I do want to shout this lady out right here. Okay, this black woman in the brown coat. Now, you see all the foolery that's happening. People are throwing stuff at the players and booing them and everything else. But look at the support that she is still giving. Boom. That's all right. That's all right. Okay, that's that mom energy right there. You see what kind of foolery was taking place? Like, all kind of stuff was going on that night. And I'm not sure if the guy's plan was to hurt himself or pretend to be injured so that he could sue and get some money. But I'm sure those plans were canceled if he would have gone to court and then they played this video back. And can you just picture the judge like, so this is you right here. This is you punching yourself. Wait, this was you going up the stairs and then coming back down, punching yourself and throwing yourself on the ground. Okay. Go home. Go. Leave before I hold you in contempt of court. But so it was an interesting documentary. It does a great job of setting the scene. I think that's one of the things that didn't really take place when all of this initially happened, and a lot of us saw the playback on ESPN or on the news the following day. None of us really knew what was really happening at that point in time. And so the documentary dives into what was happening with each player individually, as far as psychologically and personally, and also bringing light to what was happening in the environment. It was already a very hostile environment. It was a hostile series. And they talk about the fact that fans a lot of times also provoke the players, and that fans have gotten so comfortable with the level of disrespect that now they're comfortable enough to where they can assault players or put their hands on them or spit on them or do whatever, and they think nothing is supposed to happen. We're now at a space where people are comfortable walking up to an athlete that's 6'9", 260 pounds of muscle and telling them to their face that they suck and that their mom came over to their house last night and she'll be back again, so deal with it because now I'm your dad. Like, that's kind of the energy that exists in sporting. But, you know, going into a deeper conversation, my sentiments still stay the same as far as what I said in the last one, where I say a lot of times what you're seeing is you have a lot of people who feel that they own these athletes, especially when it comes to black athletes. A lot of people feel that they own every element of their existence, whether it be their talent, their opinions, or how they just have the right to exist. They feel that there's some kind of ownership that exists within it and that they're supposed to dictate what it is these players do, which gives them leverage to disrespect or assault or do whatever they want to these players with no consequence. And so you kind of see that reflected in what happens in the documentary. But it's not just that documentary, it's sports in general. You see that when athletes give political opinions or they talk about, you know, different things that affect their community. You often see people tell them to shut up or shut up and be happy that you got money, so on and so forth. And I think it comes to a deeper layer where, again, there's also envy. There's a lot of people who feel, you know, they see what they want to be in a lot of these athletes. And because it didn't happen for them, now there's that envy that's there. So you add that into the fact that they think they own the players, and then you add the fact that a lot of these people see black players as beneath them. Yes, these players are extremely talented and they bring in all this wealth, but at the end of the day, people still see them as beneath them. And so that gives them privilege to go and disrespect and do whatever. And again, it just goes into so many different layers, because when I say the idea of seeing them as beneath, when we talk about the kind of money that these athletes bring in, because you also notice when athletes talk politics or talk about police brutality or anything else like that, the first response you often see people bring up is how much they're worth. Oh, I see LeBron is worth this much, but he's talking about white privilege. You know, they bring all kind of conversations. But when you talk about the kind of wealth that exists, there's an envy for what it is that these people have. Because again, these people are making 7, 8, 9 figures, right? This is not the normal experience for the average person, no matter how hard you work. And when you talk about the wealth gap, and when you look at what it is that black people collectively make in this country, there's a conversation about the fact that people feel that these athletes don't deserve what it is that they've earned, because people feel that they should have what those people have. And so now you have this energy where, again, that conversation of thinking you own the players, and then you're envious because they have everything you want, and then you also see them as beneath you, and so it gives you privy to do whatever you want to these athletes. And I think that's why some of the environments are so hostile. I think back to even like Avery Bradley from the Celtics when he got traded. I remember he got traded from the Celtics, and I'm talking, not Avery Bradley, I'm sorry, Isaiah Thomas. That's what I'm talking about. When Isaiah Thomas got traded from the Celtics. And I'm talking about the younger one, not the older one, but the one that's like in my age bracket. And so I remember he got traded from the Celtics, and then interestingly enough, they were dragging this kid or dragging this guy on social media. You're a traitor. You'll never play in the city again, blah, 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 blah. And it was like, he didn't ask to leave. He was just on contract, and they changed it, and he woke up one day and he wasn't a Celtic anymore. Nothing in his power. It was the people above him that made the decision. Kind of reminds me, again, the book $40 Million Slaves, where, again, for me, a lot of times, the way that people treat these athletes, it's almost like watching people on the auction block, to be honest. But getting back to Isaiah Thomas, what was interesting about that, like I said, he was traded, but you watch people just chew him out. And it was so bad because around that same time, his sister had just died. And I remember seeing the clip where he's on the bench and Avery Bradley is trying to, comfort him and give him some words of encouragement because he pretty much played right as everything had just happened. His sister had just died, and I think maybe 1 or 2 days later, he still came to the game and still played because he didn't want to let the team down. And so it's interesting to see how these players a lot of times will give their all, but it's so easy to dismiss and throw them away once they don't meet an element of what it is that people feel they're entitled to when it comes to that conversation of ownership again. And so again, you just see the environment can be very hostile sometimes. And so I think you only see this also in sports that are dominated by black athletes. You don't see this in certain, so look at golf, right? Golf is not really a sport that black athletes really dominate. And again, that's a conversation of accessibility and resources. For many, many years in the past, black people weren't even allowed on the golf course, right? And so we fast forward generationally, and now you have this sport that is deemed as prestigious and esteemed. And so when you look at the environment, it's totally different from something like the NFL or the NBA, right? So you go, if you've ever seen like the golf tournament, it's a very regal environment. Everyone is calm and collected. Everybody has on business casual attire, and people walk in a single file line, and they'll follow the player as they go from hole to hole. And everybody's very quiet. They're quiet so that the players have an opportunity to hit the ball, and hopefully they get it in the hole right away. And so everyone's very quiet, gives them an opportunity to concentrate and do their best, as opposed to if you watch an NBA game or any kind of game when it's free throw time, the players be shaking because they're trying to tune out 15,000 people that are booing them at the same time. But anyway, back to golf. So it's quiet, and everyone applauds for everyone, very regal claps. And even if you don't like that player, you will clap for them, and you'll give them that due respect. And so even if they miss the hole, instead of booing them and telling them that they suck and you're never going to work in this town again and you're overpaid, it goes to, oh, you hear that collective, oh, very compassionate, very passionate. Oh, they feel for the player. They recognize that they really wanted to make that one. Oh, maybe next time. And so, the grass is extremely green, and even the announcer has a very calm and collected demeanor, very tranquil with how they do everything. And, even as they're doing the announcements, instead of spending all day on the stats about how terrible they did in the last game and where they got traded from and how much they're bringing in and blah, 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 it's focused on the individual. Well, he's having a great game. He actually just had a daughter that was born last Tuesday, and so he's actually here today on the hole, on the green, and we're going to see if he's able to do exactly what he did, and he's going for it. We're going to bring the mics down a little bit so he can concentrate, and looks like a great shot. Looks like it's going, and it's going. Amazing. Another amazing job. All right, let's go to the next, another amazing player. As opposed to the NBA, it's like you start watching the NBA, they're trying to do the free throw shot, and the announcer's talking about how they're 2 for 30 with field goals, and I don't even know what they were thinking about paying this person that much, and they shouldn't have been the second draft pick, and that's the problem now, and so on and so forth, and this team is struggling, and the coach really needs to go back and rebuild. And so like I said, it just feels like you're watching the auction block sometimes, but it's just very interesting. And so again, it's not to say that athletes all of a sudden need peace and quiet, and when you're talking about sports that all of a sudden nobody's allowed to, I guess, heckle or do whatever, because it comes with the territory. That's how the game works. Same with comedy. When I did comedy, one of the things I always learned is, if a heckler comes, you better roll with the punches and be quick on your feet, all right? Because the minute you let them get under your skin, it's over. But going back to the documentary, again, they do a great job of, again, setting the scene, but they also do talk about how a lot of people were trying to fake their injury so that they could sue. And the most interesting one is the guy that pretty much, if you remember the clip where he walks up on Ron Artest and then Ron Artest swings at him, it's interesting because it shows him doing an interview right after that happens. And then fast forward, maybe like an hour after everything took place in the arena, then it shows him on the stretcher going to the ambulance with the neck brace. I was like, you know what? So yeah, a lot of people had plans and were plotting, and even the guy who threw the cup had no remorse for the fact that he started the whole thing, because what made it worse was he threw the cup, the player went and punched the person next to him. He didn't even feel bad for the person that got beat up. I'm like, dang. That was a wild time. It was really wild. And again, like, when it happened, the media spun it all and just said it was 100% on the players, and these are terrible role models, and they need to be able to conduct themselves, and, they're just so beastly and aggressive and, just totally uncalled for. And so there was no accountability held for the fact that, hey, a lot of the people in the stands it was crazy. And for the players in the documentary, they said because there really wasn't any security that day, and there were literally like a handful of police on the scene, it felt like they were being attacked by 15,000 people, because again, once everything started, you had people rushing the floor and looking for players and running up on players, and then people are throwing the drinks in the it was a lot, but it's an interesting watch. Anyway, check it out when you get a chance. I also got a chance to watch Respect, the Aretha biopic that stars Jennifer Hudson, as well as Marlon Wayans and Forrest Whitaker and Mary J. Blige and a few other people as well. Overall, I didn't know what to make of the movie. I didn't dislike the movie, but I also didn't love it. But I will say the highlight of the movie is definitely the music and the singing. Jennifer Hudson does a phenomenal job in her role. I guess if I have a beef, it's more so the script. It's not really the execution of how the script was portrayed by the actors and the actresses, but I think Aretha has such a complex story to tell. There is so much that happened in that woman's life, like so much. And at the same time, Aretha was very private. She didn't like a lot of things out. Even if you're somebody who's read like her autobiography versus the David Ritz book, it's two totally different spectrums. And so it's kind of that question of what's respectful and what's trying it, like what's digging too deep and putting things out there that she wouldn't want people to know. And so I think that's the challenge they ran into with this specific script. I do know that there was the Aretha Genius series that came out on Nat Geo some months back, that it's like 5 or 6 parts. They go a lot more in depth and go deeper. However, I wasn't really too pressed to support that one for a handful of reasons. But with this one, like I said, with respect, I just think the challenge was telling her story in a way that comes off polished. And I think because so much happened in her life, there's a lot of things that they touch on and then they don't revisit. And so you're kind of left sometimes with things like, wait a minute, well, where did this person come from? Okay. But overall, I still think the execution was good. And then as far as like Jennifer Hudson, I always say like it is very commendable that she's still a part of the conversation after 17 years. You know, she's kind of been a household name, or if you at least started with her from American Idol since 2004. And the fact that she's been able to really revamp and reinvent herself and definitely stay in the realms of the public eye and be successful and really just, she's done a lot of really amazing things, especially in film. So good for her. But I still say support and check out the movie. It's still decent, especially the music. There's still some fun scenes in it as well. I enjoyed the scene with them creating Respect or creating Never Loved a Man. The music is the highlight for me. That's the part that makes it fun. It's enjoyable. But I think the script, there's a lot of doom and gloom. Like there's not a lot of happy moments in my opinion. So it kind of makes it seem like she was just this miserable person and nothing good ever happened. And so I think that would be my flaw. I understand it's entertainment and you want the story to still be entertaining. So they're going to really latch onto all of the things that get people talking. But I think sometimes there has to be balance. But I think, again, because it's a movie, their only approach to be able to get that balance would have been creating a series. However, there was already the Nat Geo series. So, again, it was all complicated. But I still think it was decent. I think Jennifer did an amazing job. And so, you know, check it out and let me know what you think when you get a chance. And then somebody was asking me about the Usher show. It looks pretty good. I don't know if I'll be going, but no, it looks like a great show. I saw him in 2014. I saw the UR Experience show. It was a really great show, like really great live band, great vocals, great dancing. So I'm sure like this show is probably just as good, especially with the residencies. They can really do a whole bunch of extra things with the staging because you don't have to carry all this extra crap to a different arena every night. So it's easier to do a more high octane show as far as like the technology and stuff that's available with the staging. So it looks like a good show. I do miss concerts a lot. I do have tickets to Erykah Badu and Chaka Khan, but I don't know if those concerts are going to happen by the time we get to September. We'll see. I don't know, that Delta variant is jumping up, but, you know, we'll see. But that looks like it'd be a fun show. But good for Usher. Look at him hanging in there. And from what I heard, I haven't heard any bad reviews, but, you know, he has a lot of hits, so I know that's going to be a good show to watch. Anyway, moving on. I have some reading material for you, so I'm going to post a link in the description. Now, this is coming from the Washington Post, and it's an article talking about how the construction of many freeways pretty much decimated and destroyed many black neighborhoods because they pretty much bulldozed right through the middle of the neighborhoods to build the freeways. Now, we've talked about that a million times on this channel, but I think this article brings about a larger conversation around the fact that black Americans have been displaced in their own country so many times in so many different ways, whether it be through eminent domain, whether it be through heirs land, which I did a really good video on that one as well. That's probably one of my favorite videos I did. It's an in the news. I think I'm talking about Coming to America in the beginning of it. I'll see if I can find a link on that one. But I go for like 20 minutes about how the conversation around heirs land played a role into like why so many people lost their land. And I correlate it and tie it to also black farmers and how many of them were not eligible to qualify for or qualify as USDA farms, which would mean that they'd get a bunch of different benefits and loans and access and grants to a lot of different things. And the reason they couldn't qualify as USDA farms again was because they had heirs land, and heirs land wasn't recognized by the government as being an actual deed, and so on and so forth. All kind of craziness. But also, again, then the conversation of gentrification or even just violence, where again you had so many racial attacks that took place between, in the early 1900s, where again there's Tulsa, there's St. Louis, there's DC, there's Atlanta, there's New York, there's literally every metropolitan, Detroit, Chicago, every metropolitan city, St. Louis, I forgot what city in Louisiana, but a bunch of different cities where, again, towns were just burned down. Rosewood, Florida, and so on and so forth. So there's the element of violence. And then even in modern times, even if you just talk about opportunity zones, I talked about how that was some BS. That's in a video called Breadcrumb Policy or something like that. But talking about the fact that opportunity zones was presented to us as something where, yes, this is going to give opportunity to poor neighborhoods where black people live, where they'll have an opportunity to build and build themselves up, when in reality, opportunity zones pretty much just gave tax credit to developers to go into areas that were deemed opportunity zones. But there were no line items or anything in stipulation that says, when you create whatever you create, you have to give jobs to the people in this area, or it has to service that area. And so because of that, the majority of the projects that came out of these opportunity zones were just real estate and hotels. And even then, again, all that did was skyrocket the property taxes, and people still got pushed out. And so again, that kind of sped up the process of gentrification through the help from the federal government. And so, there's a bunch of different conversations to be had, but it's not too much of a read. It's not a long read, but it's an interesting read. It talks about what was happening in New Orleans, and talking about a few other cities, including Oakland, with just how, you build these freeways, and then even the quality of life goes down, because again, now you got everybody getting asthma because you got a freeway running right through everybody's neighborhood. And even just talking about, even when you think about the science and what happens in a lot of metropolitan cities, and why the temperatures tend to be higher in metropolitan cities, because there aren't a lot of green areas. There's not a lot of grass. Everything is tarmac and glass and metal, and so the sun is just hitting everything. And again, there's no shade, and so that's why a lot of times if you go to certain cities, depending on what the makeup is of that city or that section of town, if there's not a lot of green space, the temperature tends to be higher. So there's so many things that just correlate. And it's crazy how anti-blackness and racism all correlate to why people can end up suffering collectively. And now it's interesting because even with a lot of these cities that have been created, and again, we talk about the issue around temperatures and things like that, now you have white Americans moving into these very areas, because now these are the hip areas to be in. These are the areas where they have the new high rises and a new this and a new that. And so now you're watching people almost backtrack and try to undo some of the things to make life more accommodating for the people who are now living in these areas. And so I do recognize, like, the current administration did have a plan to try to somewhat remedy, I guess, what has happened to a lot of these communities. But that was some BS too, because initially the idea with this infrastructure bill, $20 billion was going to go to pretty much trying to make communities whole that were affected by that. But again, this whole conversation of reaching across the aisle and let's meet together in the middle, 20 billion dropped down to 1 billion, and half of that ain't going to the people. So much for that. But check that article out when you get a chance. And then when it comes to Afghanistan, absolutely crazy. I just saw that clip of the people at the airport where they were running, and you saw some people literally holding onto the plane as it was taking off, and sadly some of them fell in and didn't make it. Absolutely crazy. When it's all said and done, I've always had this same opinion for the longest. We should have never been over there to begin with. You know what I mean? And I personally feel that all four of the past presidents have blood on their hands in relation to Afghanistan. Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden. Now, I do feel that some presidents have more blood than the others, but at the end of the day, it's still blood. We shouldn't have been over there, and you have a lot of people who have died as collateral to a lot of really bad decisions and really bad policy. And again, that was all in the realm of passing things off to tell the American people that, there were terrorist cells here, and we did what we did to get rid of Al-Qaeda, and then in addition we wanted to go and give freedom to the people of Afghanistan. And I'm like, how y'all gonna give freedom to somebody else and we ain't even got it here? If we want to give freedom and democracy to the people of Afghanistan. And they did the same thing with Iraq, Operation Enduring Iraqi Freedom. And I'm like, y'all giving away all this freedom, but we can't seem to find it over here. And I'm not trying to say that other people are supposed to suffer until Americans have everything they're supposed to have, but it's just like, look in the mirror. Like, no, it's evident that every single time the United States goes into any country, half the time they end up worse off. Okay, while I'm talking, I'm just going to run a list of all of these countries that the United States has pretty much gone into at one point and either try to do a regime change or try to take out their leader or do something that would shift the structure of how that country operates. And you start to see a pattern, because in reality, the majority of these countries that we've gone into, there was some kind of interest that, again, brought us some kind of monetary gain, whether it be these defense contracting companies that made hundreds of millions and some actually made billions of dollars in relation to supporting all of these wars. And it's a bunch of companies. So like Boeing is an example. Yes, they make commercial airliners, but almost a third of their revenue came from defense contracting. Same with Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, General Dynamics. Like, there's a bunch of different companies. And so you're just seeing that a lot of times. I always say follow the money and ask questions, because a lot of times it has nothing to do with the will of the people. And a lot of times we keep going into these countries talking about how we're going to give them freedom and everything, and we never pay attention to the dynamics of what's happening in that country at the time. So when you look at a place like Afghanistan already had a whole lot going on. They've had so many people come and go through that country trying to change up stuff. The UK did it, Soviet Union has done it, the United States has now done it. Afghanistan is a place that has 20 different ethnic groups, and they all have different ways of how they do things. That also includes different languages. And so one of the flaws that has existed, especially ever since the Berlin Conference of 1884, are people either from the United States or from Western Europe going into different places all around the world and drawing borders and creating countries and making groups of people live amongst each other that have differing ways of doing things. And so then you have all the chaos and so on and so forth. But that's pretty much where we're at with Afghanistan. But the sad part, when you're looking at this clip of these people at this airport, okay, these are people who pretty much helped the United States. And now it looks like they're kind of being left in the shuffle, or they're being kind of a last minute priority. And what I mean by that is, these are people who served as interpreters. They served as people that were guides. They helped maneuver people through different regions. They helped a lot of the generals and a lot of the contractors and U.S. civilians that are working over there as well. And so now these people need to get out, because there's a fear that as the Taliban continues to take back over all of these different cities, and mind you, there was kind of apparently, from what I understand, there was already an agreement that, you know, they were going to come in and take over everything anyway, but the agreement was that they wouldn't harm any of the people that still need to get out. But again, like, all of these people trusted the United States with their livelihood, and now it looks like some of them are being left by, you know, the wayside, which is kind of messed up. And what's interesting is when you look at like a place like Guam, which is another U.S. territory that we went and snatched up, and they did not ask to be snatched up. Guam is often served as a place for transition. If you go back to 1975, you had Operation New Life, and so that was for 130,000 people in Vietnam that we pretty much helped. But 111,000 of those 130,000 transitioned through Guam. Like, Guam was like a holding place while people got their paperwork and stuff all set up and put together, and then people were sent to wherever they were going to go to start their new lives. And so Guam is often operated, or at least our military base in Guam has operated as a place to transition people out safely. We did that as well in 96 with the Kurdish. And so Guam actually reached out to the United States. Well, I guess technically they count as the United States. They reached out to the leadership and said, hey, and now mind you, this is like May or June of 2021, saying, hey, you know, we know that 9/11 is the new date for getting everybody out, so what's the move? We're ready when you guys are ready. And I don't know why people didn't move in the pace that they could have, but the ball was dropped. People took their time, and now here we are, and it's chaotic. Now, some people are saying, well, at the same time, yeah, we can be pissed off, but, you know, the previous administration, the plan was to be out by May, so it still would have been the same thing. And I agree to an extent, but I think, again, 20 years. And this was the strategy, and so it literally, you watch 20 years crumble in like a week, which is kind of scary, because when you think of how much money has been spent and where that money could have gone, how that money could have helped the people, how that money could have gone to schools, how that money could have gone to healthcare, education, jobs, housing, literally anything that you can think of. But we spent it doing exactly what? Because the people of Afghanistan are not better off. They're not at all. It's just as chaotic as it was before we got over there. And so now you have, and on top of that, now you have people who are collateral to that kind of foolery. And so it's just like, what is going on? And so it's just like, we just have a history as a country of constantly going and destabilizing governments, and then it's chaotic, and then we tip up out of there. And then we get mad because the people now have resentment towards the United States, and those children grow up to be vengeful adults, and now you want to talk about, oh, terrorism, we need to keep our eye up in national security. Well, yeah, if y'all stop bothering people, we don't got to worry about national security as much. Like, my goodness, like a random place like, I don't know, New Zealand or something, they're not worried about national security. Nobody's worried about New Zealand. You know what I mean? A random place, I don't know, like Belize is not worried about national security. A random place like wherever, Greenland, they're not worried about national security. Why? They don't have to worry about people wanting to blow them up, because they don't bother anybody most of the time. So it's just like, man, it's not a good look. So hopefully they're able to clean this mess up. Like I said, I feel all the administrations play a role in this. I think some more than others. I'm seeing the reports about how there were lots of flaws that existed within the last administration with how they did things, as far as one of the contracts that was signed, and how you had, I guess, the 5,000 Taliban people that were incarcerated be released, and apparently one of them is now possibly going to be the president, all kind of different things and different conversations. But overall, not good. Not good. Let this be a lesson learned. Please stop going into these countries. Stop. And stop trying to pass it off as giving freedom and democracy. Like, it's such a cop-out. It's such BS. But it goes into that conversation I always have about American symbolism or exceptionalism. You know, painting us out to always be the country that just does everything the best, and we have the moral compass, and everybody should be like the U.S. When in reality, the world is laughing at the U.S. That's all I'm saying. But hopefully things align, and it makes me also feel bad for those who perished. But we'll see how this goes. I think this is definitely going to be something that actually escalates into something bigger. I don't think this is the end of the conversation around Afghanistan. I think, again, you've had country after country go into Afghanistan and stir stuff up, and then there'll be another one. Well, watch it be. I'm not going to start name dropping countries, but I'm sure another one will jump right back into the mix, and here we are. But again, it's absolutely crazy. Like, I just hate that people have to be collateral to so much chaos, and the world does not have to be as chaotic as it is. But again, greed, wealth, money, hoarding, pillaging, violence, it is what it is. Anyway, moving on. And then condolences and best wishes to everybody affected by what's happening in Haiti. It just, so sad to witness, right? I just feel like they can't ever catch a break, man. And Mother Nature just will not let them be great. Like, man. And even with this earthquake, like, you remember the 2010 earthquake was a 7.0, but this earthquake was a 7.2, which we've already done our history lesson on seismic activity, but it being a 7.2 means that it's 1.5 times larger as far as how much land the quake covered, and then 1.9 times stronger than that 7.0 quake. So that's like, you know, almost twice as many times, or twice as strong. And again, it was a surface quake, so that's why there was so much damage. You know, whenever there's an earthquake, the deeper into the ground it is, the less intense it's going to be as far as the kind of damage. But the closer it is to the surface, you know, the more damage that takes place. But it's so sad. But then it got me to thinking. I was like, you know what, France, y'all need to give Haiti that $21 billion you made them pay in reparations, because money like that could have been something that would have helped infrastructure. So when people talk about a place like Japan that also has a lot of seismic activity all the time, because they have a lot of really big earthquakes as well, a lot of times they're not really getting the same kind of damage because their buildings are retrofitted and pretty much set up to sustain these kind of quakes. But a place like Haiti, again, has just been pretty much the target of so many imperialist nations that have pretty much just either set it up where there's trade embargoes, or again punished them because they didn't want to be freaking colonized, so you made them pay to not be colonized with money that they didn't have, and you disrupted and destroyed the sugarcane industry they had. And just like, I'm like, dang, just some foolery. But I just hate, again, people having to be collateral to just, it's crazy how things work full circle. Like, imagine if they didn't have to pay all of those reparations to France, you know, where they would have been able to be right now, including the embargoes that exist against them from a lot of Western countries as well. Like, that's why I'm kind of looking at some of these countries that are offering their support and everything, and I'm like, but y'all play a role into why people are suffering. You're right in the mix. Like, a lot of stuff is performative. I'm sorry. I just be looking at people sideways and looking at leadership and governments all sideways. Like, all of y'all crooked. But to my main point, hopefully they're able to continue, you know, rescuing people. The death toll the last time I looked is at about 1,200. But, you know, hopefully they're able to still rescue more people. And hopefully, man, so much I could say. That's just tough. And I think because I know a lot of people who have, like, connections to Haiti. I remember, like, the 2010 quake. That was one of the weirdest days on campus, because, you know, you had so many people who were your classmates and they actually came from Haiti to come to Howard, and then now they didn't know, you know, where family members were. That was a really, like, somber week back in 2010. And I talked about how when that happened, I went and volunteered at the Haitian embassy that week. Interesting. But again, you know, best wishes to everybody who's affected by that. And gosh, and now I know they have, like, some bad, like, weather coming across the Atlantic. I can't remember if it's a hurricane or a tropical storm, but still, I'm like, man. So hopefully everything aligns and works out for everybody affected. But anyway, that is all for tonight. I need to go to bed because I think my eyes are red at this point. But anyway, share your 2 cents. I'm out. Subscribe.
I can read your face. He's taking her everything. He's taking her everything. She's in doubt while she sleeps. All the hurt, the defeat. 'Cause it's over. 'Cause it's over. Now she's getting her stuff in, getting her stuff in, getting it, he can't save her. Now she's getting her stuff in, getting her stuff in, getting it, he can't save her. What you gonna do? When it gets so rough, what you gonna do? When you had too much, what you gonna do? When it's not enough, what you gonna do? What you gonna do? When you hurt your lies, and you got your size, you've tried. What you gonna do? What you gonna do? She's crying.